We still have award-winning broadcast journalist, lecturer and public policy analyst Adeniyi Kunu still here with us in the studio, and joining him is political analyst Ayodele Adio. Great to have you with us, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. I feel privileged and it's a pleasure being here still.
Well, gentlemen.
Yes, please.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you too.
Here we are. There's so much anxiety, so much tension across all the 28 states where voting took place yesterday. Hitches here and there and all of that. But my first question to you, what INEC has done is to say, well, we have cancelled elections in 10 polling units in Lagos State. They have also done so in Benue State, in some parts of Benue State.
Yes,
do you think that the rescheduling of elections has gone far enough in these places where, there have been problems? Or should INEC, have gone further afield, refixing the elections? In Lagos, for example, virtually every part of Lagos, there were issues. There is only in 10 polling units in Victoria Garden City and Lekki Ikate area that they are rescheduling in elections. In Benue, in one local government area. But there are also issues in River State, so do you think that INEC, in trying to make up, has gone far enough? Let me start with you, Kuna.
Within the context of our current realities, I think that INEC can only do that because don't forget, apart from the incidences of not being able to vote, we also have insecurity issues. We've got voter inducement. This is a part of the problems. But if you consider Lagos that Dr. Abasi just mentioned, you're talking about 10 polling units out of over 13,000. And I think that brings to perspective the percentile of the number of areas that perhaps they've given us the impression that there were infractions. All of the things that have been emanating from yesterday suggest that there are real problems in many areas across the state. But perhaps maybe INEC is limited when it comes to areas where insecurity issues have been mentioned, and that perhaps happens to be that INEC may be waiting for certain reports. Don't forget that anything that has to do with threats, suppression, then you're talking about the security operatives coming in to prevent that. So INEC staff or ad hoc staff may be limited in that regard. But even at that, I think that they should speak to many issues. Bearing in mind that we have 3 weeks to perhaps have addressed certain issues, because the recurrences of similar issues from February 25 should make us really think if INEC did a lot of homework. Because if you look at it, flashpoints would have been recognized right now. They had reports. As a matter of fact, over a week ago, Usman Alkali Baba, the IG of police, said all of the cases arising from February 25 have been handed over to INEC. And I believe that INEC officers would have actually gone through that comprehensive report to have actually done something with regard to that flashpoint. Then if you look at it also, the historicity of electioneering in Lagos, particularly areas like Surulere, Lekki, Elegushi axis, shows that there has always been problems in these areas. So one would have expected that these areas also that are already recognized as flashpoints are areas that INEC really did a lot to actually address. So I think that INEC has to do more. We may not be able to influence what INEC decides regarding maybe the postponement of elections, maybe cancellation of certain things, but what we can do is to tell INEC to pay attention to other areas. Don't forget that when they held their Anambra elections, I actually was in Anambra 2021. That's in November. And when they started with the Beavers there, before they went to Osun, I mentioned to those who care to listen that election or the success of it could never be the parameter with which you measure the successes expected in other elections. That you're talking about just one out of many other states. They went to Osun, we also saw that. So these are issues.
Could you just hold on?
Yes, please.
Adio, if you could just wait a little. We go to Delta State now,
yes,
where the State Commissioner for Information, Charles Aniago, is standing by to speak to us on the electoral process in the state and what his observations are. Good to have you, Charles Aniago. Hello, Charles.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And Leila, let me also appreciate your colleagues in Arise for what you have been doing with respect to covering elections, both what you did during the presidential elections and what you're doing at the moment. And it's my pleasure to join you this afternoon.
So what is the situation in Delta State? There have been reports of vote buying, voter suppression, voter intimidation, and violence in parts of the state. Would you like to keep us up to speed about the situation in Delta State?
Well, you recall that before even the commencement of this election, some days before now, I had the privilege of addressing the press where I raised a number of issues, particularly with what seems like desperation on the part of the Deputy President of the Nigerian Senate, and how he has also gone ahead from intelligence that were gathered to procure uniform for some security personnel. And so that the Nigerian military, I want to believe, did not allow that to manifest the much that they would have loved to. In terms of voter turnout, it seems that across the country, the turnout wasn't that much. But what we're having now in terms of challenge is that a number of the local government results have come in, but we have two local governments where we're having issues. One is Ethiop West, where you have the former governor of the state, James Ibori, and specifically in two wards in that particular local government, Ward 7 and Ward 8, where we gathered that up to now, they have not been able to allow the INEC official to compute the results from the different units in the wards and then make them available at the local government center where they are supposed to now collate the different wards in that local government and proceed to Asaba. There are a number of local government that have already come to Asaba, but these two wards we gathered are locked up somewhere, and then they are trying as much as possible to tamper with that result. We do hope that the electoral body will take note of that, because that is quite disturbing. We also hear that in Urugutu, that there are also challenges where the officials of the APC have more like intimidated the INEC officials, and then they are also taking steps to alter the results that they got from the unit. We have seen some of the results from the different units and how they mutilated them. We are saying this for the purpose of getting both the security agencies and the electoral body to take note. Deltas voted yesterday, and they voted quite peacefully in a larger part of the state, and the results are already coming in, and we do hope that the INEC and indeed the security agencies will take steps to address these issues, because oftentimes when you have challenge with election, it is always easy for politicians to begin to accuse the electoral body at the higher level, but what politicians more like perpetrate at times is what is challenging. And so we want to know how come result of a unit, result of a ward is still being heard, has not been announced, when others are already even announcing the result of local government in Asaba. All those results have been collated at their local government headquarters, and they are proceeded to the state capital, announced. So far, no fewer than 4 local governments have submitted their results in Asaba. So how do you explain that since yesterday and now that you are still having wards being held in some areas? We believe that some form of manipulation is taking place, and we do hope that the electoral body will take note.
And thanks for bringing this to the forefront. And you mentioned low voter turnout, but would you agree that low voter turnout is as a result of voter suppression that's been going on? And secondly, INEC had not just 3 weeks to prepare following the presidential elections, but INEC has had a long time to prepare for these elections. But if we look even just at that 3-week period between the presidential elections and now, the INEC had to really work on issues that came up in the presidential elections. How would you say that INEC has done?
Well, in terms of the processes, INEC tried. The beavers worked quite well in a number of these areas. The INEC officials came out in good time. They did their work. But when you talk about voter suppression or low voter turnout, it behoves on all of us, not even only the electoral body, to embark on what you may call massive sensitization of Nigerians to understand the importance of voting. Because when you keep quiet, and even those who are enlightened don't get involved when it's time for you to make a choice as to those who will lead you. And unfortunately, there are a number of individuals whom you may think are informed enough, who may begin to ask, possibly, that how do you want me to come there? What are you going to provide for me to come? But those who are informed will travel, spend their money, because they know the importance of picking those who are going to represent them or those who are going to lead them at different levels. And so the issue of low turnout during voting or during elections is not just going to be the issue of INEC. It speaks more to the inability of Nigerians to understand the importance of their franchise. Because some will say, what does my single vote, what does it matter? You want me to go and stand under the sun? Some may even come, if it's taking quite a while, before it gets to their turn, they will tell you they are hungry, they are tired, and of course, you know what the economy is reporting. And so, it is not all the time that even some of these... Don't forget that in most of these communities, the people voting are either the brothers or the sisters of those either they are voting for, or those who are asking them to vote. Like if you come to my ward or my unit, the people voting in that place are my brothers and sisters, they are my kids and kin. So beyond voting, if the person is hungry and he tells you, please, I want to eat biscuits, and you decide to provide biscuit, to be termed vote buying, they will forget that before now, you may have also been living that way with the people. But what is most important, yes, I cannot deny the fact that there could be some element of some form of inducement coming from some other areas, but we didn't embark on that. But whether that is the case or not, is that what is most important is the sensitization of the average voter. To understand that whatever money that is going to be given to you is not what matters, but that the choice you are making is a choice that is going to speak to your progress in a period of not less than 4 years, as the case may be, particularly for the case in the case of the House of Assembly, as it is now, or the governorship, except maybe in local government where you have some form of variance as to the number of years the person will be in office. But it's important that the players allow the process to say through, particularly the political class, when people become desperate, when people say that they are not winning, and they adopt all sorts of machinations to alter the choice of the people. That is what is disturbing. And that is why we are calling the Independent National Electoral Commission, we are calling on the international community, we are calling on security agencies to take very, very special note of those words I have mentioned in Ethiopia West, which is in our area, where our former governor, James Ibori, is from, and then also in Orogun, where the governorship candidate of the APC is from. It's quite disturbing that they have held the INEC officials hostage, and that up to this moment, the result of even units have not been able to fully put them together in the ward, let alone proceeding to the local government area. And we also here, they are forcing, particularly in the case of 7 and 8 in Ethiopia West, trying to force another agent on the PDP, different from the one that is recognized by INEC. And we want to believe that the reason is that they will want whatever agent they are putting forward to accept the compromise that may come from this delay that we are witnessing, which is quite disturbing.
Okay, if I may ask you, we have less than a minute to go. The last time I checked, INEC had already declared over 4,555 results from Delta State and posted same on the IREF portal out of 5,863. Is your concern born out of the fact that your party is probably losing out? In other words, how market? What is the situation? Because you must have been paying more attention to the results. Briefly.
Well, thank you very much. For what we have, we have 25 local governments in Delta. It's very much on record from what we have seen. Of course, not until INEC announces at the state level, you cannot begin to declare a winner. But in 22 of these 25 local governments, we are leading very, very comfortably. But you recall at the beginning of this conversation, you talked about low voter turnout. So you may be leading somebody with 2,000 in one place, leading again with about 700, or another place 3,000. So what happens in a ward is very important. If somebody goes and front loads a ward where you are supposed to have like 10,000 votes, and he makes it 70,000 votes, you will know that he has been able to just use one word to undermine all the other things that you have had. Even here in Asaba, some of the local government results have been declared. The House of Assembly members have been declared in most of these areas. The PDP won fair and square. And so if they decide to hold back these 3 wards that I have mentioned, and decide to make sure that instead of coming in with about 13,000 or 10,000 or possibly even 5,000 results, and then decide to make it 50,000 and then make another particular ward 40,000, the person will end up wiping out whatever progress you have recorded in these other 22 other local government areas. And that is why we're expressing concern that the electoral body must take interest in what is happening in those 3 different wards, because it's quite disturbing that they have not even up to now been able to allow the INEC officials to proceed to the local government areas to declare the results that they have been able to collate from the units in these different wards. So that at the end of the day, we do not resort to some form of crisis that is not that is avoidable.
Okay, Charles, thank you very much indeed. We'll come back to the studio here Adeni Kunu, sorry to interrupt you. We needed to get that update from Delta State.
It's actually a very important development because it is interrelated. We know the pivotal position that Delta State holds as far as the affairs of this country is concerned, concerning the finance of this country. We also know the neighboring state of Rivers and what transpires there. I think that in all, it is that government has to show superintendency in the affairs that concerns our agency, because a situation where people that are riotous, lawless, and non-state actors appears to be having dominant position in the process that belongs to the government, it seems though as if government has been subordinated. And that is the misfortune of a government that cannot demonstrate that it has the capacity to manage a process that it instituted. Whatever it is that has to do with what is playing out now is a process initiated and, of course, constitutionally supported to be managed by INEC and all the supporting agencies. It therefore means that government must begin to look at itself that perhaps these incidences are a microcosm of the larger Nigerian problem. And if these things are a larger or more or less a microcosm of the larger Nigerian problem, how then do we begin to address these issues? We don't deal with the big things, we deal with the issues from the people. In the first place, in societies where people are more civilized, it is always and almost impossible to have the level of desecration of a process such as we have seen. Then why is it that in those societies, people themselves are able to comport themselves? It is simply because leadership has shown that it doesn't have tolerance for such negative attitude, and at the same time that their lives seem to be a premium and certain things are put in place for them to actually behave themselves properly. So I need to say here very clearly that INEC has to put notes down, and government that is the lead agency, more or less as the president has said, that it will leave us with good election, they owe this country an apology, really, and that is where we should begin from. Very key now.
Ayodele, let's bring you in here as well. What are your thoughts on the way in which the process has gone, what we've seen transpire over the past 36 to 48 hours?
I think, to be honest, my criticism of INEC will be a bit nuanced because in the first instance, the things within their control, which is, for instance, the BVAS, the accreditation process, I think it was, a bit seamless across the entire state in Lagos, which means to an extent we have moved the needle forward in terms of voter accreditation, which has given voice to ordinary Nigerians to elect the people that they want to elect. The problem, however, is the fact that desperate politicians have used thugs, violence, and ethnic baiting to sabotage the entire process, of which INEC has very little control over. As much as INEC gets a lot of criticism, I see very few criticisms about the Nigerian police, to such a situation where there were polling units, and many of them across certain places in Lagos West senatorial districts, where the people who disrupted elections came with sticks and machetes to destroy ballot boxes or to chase away voters. And you would imagine that police with guns who were properly kitted could not repel such attacks in those particular polling units. So for me, I think where I would really criticize INEC is the fact that it is hard to argue against what our eyes saw yesterday, that there were a lot of irregularities across the entire states. There were places in Ajeromi Felodun where ballot boxes were thrown into the gutters and people in defiance were pulling out these papers and sunning them down to dry so that their votes will count. Now, what did INEC do in those situations? And like you rightfully said in the beginning, only 10 polling units, and in VGC, where also, because the people cried out to say that they were disenfranchised and they couldn't vote, that elections are being rerun in those particular places. How about the hundreds of places where people were chased away? The places where people were attacked? The head of the Nigerian Youth Fund, Okoyemi Oriuno, was attacked in Etiosa. He was bleeding all over because he was trying to cover an election in Ikate. So these are the issues that we must address. And I like how former President Jonathan put it yesterday in Bielsa. You cannot kill us if you want to serve us, which is you have to allow the people exercise their franchise willingly, without intimidation, without suppression. Like we saw in Oyo State, if you're popular And if the people love you, you will be elected unequivocally. You would have all sorts of landslide victories, and you will not need to oppress or intimidate people to vote. That's a lesson that should be learned. And that was a letdown in Lagos State yesterday. It's probably one of the worst elections I've seen in Lagos State since 2003.
Well, there are probably more lessons to be learned, but we'll get to that in due course. But what is clear is that in Lagos, 10 polling units have had rescheduled elections. Elections were also cancelled in parts of Plateau over logistics errors, and also in Benue State, in Kwande local government area. But the question is, does this go far enough? Because violence is reported nationwide in Emoha, local government area of Rivers State, for example, and in Taraba, in Kogi, so it's not just about Lagos, it's a nationwide problem. And election observers have raised the question about credibility. What does this say about the credibility of this entire process?